evening. Today is August 11th. It is currently 7:03 p.m. My name is Nathan Polsky. I am the campaign support director for the Libertarian Party of Texas. Today we have with us Jeff Miller. He is running for Texas House District 14 down in the Brazos area. So you all know the format of the show, stream, whatever you want to call it. We are streaming on multiple platforms. We're currently on YouTube, on Facebook, on X. If you are following along, feel free to drop questions into the chat. And if we have time towards the end or during the question portion, then we can throw some of those to Jeff and see how he takes them. If you are not currently following any of the platforms, or if you're not currently subscribed, please be sure to hit the subscribe button, get notifications anytime we go live. This is a little bit later than some of our other candidate interviews, but not the last one. We have another one coming up soon as well. So to not take too much time, let's go ahead and dive right on in.
Hello.
Howdy, Jeff. How are you today?
I am hanging in there. How are you?
Cannot complain. It is beautiful outside. Weather's okay. We had a little bit of rain, so now I actually have to go outside and mow. But other than that, it's a typical day in Texas.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so this isn't your first time running. I know you've run before.
That's correct.
So for everybody who doesn't know who you are, they didn't pay attention last cycle. Who are you and why are you running?
Yeah, so that's one of those questions I always like. Well, I could give anywhere from like a 30-second answer to, just take your entire allotted time on that. Because I could do like my whole life story about, how I got into politics in the first place or any of that. But I mean, the short answer I'll say, and then I'll expand a little bit, is that I'm running for one of the most fundamental reasons, which is to give voters a choice. And at all levels of government, from the city all the way up to federal, the Democrats and Republicans have been, telling people, lying to people for a long time, and telling people that there's a two-party system and you have to vote for one or the other. And they've been making, through their gerrymandering, less and less districts that are actually competitive. So almost all of those places, um, it's going to be either all Democrats or all Republicans, because that's just the way that it's designed. And what that does, of course, is it absolves the elected officials from actually being accountable to their constituents when it comes to at least the general election. Maybe in the primary, you have things that happen, like, we just saw Cornyn go down to Paxton in the Senate race, and things like that do happen. But all of the action is in the primaries because, when for a lot of areas, the general election is just an afterthought. And I live in a place like that where it's heavily Republican. So everybody doesn't even look at our congressional race and state rep race and county races. The general election is not really even looked at that much, because it's going to be whichever Republican was the nominee, is the attitude. And history has shown that. So there's no reason for anybody to think anything's going to happen differently unless somebody comes along and changes that. But the Democrats and Republicans, as much as they may portray each other as the enemy, the fundamental thing is true that they agree on, which is that to keep growing government, to make government into the flavor of big government that they would rather it be. So they'll focus on culture war issues and things like that to try to divide people. But when it comes to, are we going to spend more money? They all agree the answer is yes. Are we going to take more control away from people and consolidate it into Austin or Washington, D.C., or even your local county commission, wherever the place that the power is? Are we going to consolidate that and continue to maintain and build that, as opposed to being responsive to people? And the answer to both of those parties is yes. So more than anything, I'm running so that there is another option, so that people who say they're fed up with that, who see through that, who are tired of that message being perpetrated by whichever party is the majority in your area. In my district, it happens to be Republicans, but if you're in, the heart of Austin, or parts of San Antonio or Dallas or Houston where, it's very Democrat controlled, then you probably feel the same way about them. You get that message that there is no other option, that support me because I have to fight the evil other side, not because I've actually accomplished anything or helped you in any way. So my message is to reduce government, is to maximize freedom. I want you to be able to do what you want to do with your life. I don't want to control you or tell you how to run your life. I don't want there to be, I don't want it to matter who the majority is in Austin because there shouldn't have enough power for it to make a difference. It ought to be that the power is as local as possible, right down to the individual, that you have the ability to do what you want to do. There's so many layers of bureaucracy and government regulations and laws that are just completely unnecessary. People have ceded their power to the government, and in a lot of cases, not because they thought that was a great idea. It's just people are living their lives and they can't constantly keep track of how many things are being stacked on top of them. And so it's tough. But I'm running to give people an option so that even if they don't think I can win, they at least feel good about who they voted for. And if enough of those people happen to decide enough is enough, and I am going to go ahead and vote Miller, then maybe I do win. So weird things happen sometimes, and that's why I'm there. So I will tell people that if they ask me, "Are you running to win?" Well, the answer is yes, but I'm also realistic, and I'm not making any bets that I'm going to win. Uh, but I will be on the ballot. Our county agreed to pay the fee for me to be on the ballot this time, so that part's not an issue. Our other three local candidates uh, have not yet gotten the notice from the Secretary of State, but they've gotten notice
Hmm.
from the county officials that they've sent word to the Secretary of State that they want them kicked off the ballot. So with the precedent they started last time, that'll probably happen again. And I wanted to make sure to talk about that in this because I think we really can't mention enough
Hmm.
what the state government has done to libertarians and any other parties that would try to get on the ballot in Texas because they don't want competition. And Republicans and Democrats have worked together to keep competition off the ballot. And we had a bill actually written and supported by LPTexas in the last legislature to not even try to eliminate the filing fees anymore, but to just say that the fees should come back to the parties, to all the parties. And the parties are private organizations. They should be able to spend their money and nominate their candidates however they want. And that bill, of course, was rejected uh, because the Republicans in charge know that if they took that way of keeping our candidates down away, that we would have more candidates again.
Hmm.
Because us as a party are not going to hold people to having to pay to be on the ballot. So, yeah, as Clyde talked about when he was here, that's been going on since at least 2018 when they started passing laws to try to reduce our candidates, and it's made a drastic difference. The one positive that we can take out of that is because we have less candidates, the resources of people who would help campaigns are not as spread thin. If people want to help
Hmm.
libertarian candidates, it's a smaller number this year. So if you are one of those people that says, "Well, I would help, but there's so many candidates, I don't know how to don't know how to help," there are there's a smaller number of people, so you can choose, who you want to give to, but or if you want to just give a little bit to everybody, you can do that, and it won't cost you as much as it would have, or at least it won't spread you as thin as it
Right.
when we had, a lot more candidates. So I guess that's the only positive that can be gained from that. But I hope that our candidates and our staff and our party will constantly remember to tell people because a lot of people still don't know that this is happening. That they just might think, oh, the libertarians just aren't active anymore, or they all joined one of the other parties. That's not true. We've had systematic, tearing down of our candidate base through the filing fee laws and the
Hmm.
ability of the Secretary of State to take us off the ballot. So I wanted to make sure early on that I mentioned that for anyone who tunes out later, that that's a message I think we should hammer as much as possible in all of this. And I ran for state rep in this district in 2022, and I got 32% of the vote against a five-term incumbent Republican. So the most anyone had gotten before that was 19%. So it was a significant, increase in the number of people that were willing to vote Libertarian. Uh, Cynical people might say, well, they were all just Democrats that were anti-Republican. But even if that's the case, that's still a significant number of more people that were willing to vote Libertarian that hadn't before. Um, and that's what those two-way races kind of show us. When it's a three-way race, like it is this time, like it was when I ran last time, it's a little bit harder to tell that. But you can also see those that will vote Libertarian even when there's Democrat and Republican on the ballot. So I still believe we will find a breakthrough at some point. I can't say exactly when or
Mhm.
where it'll be, but I that's the reason I think it's important to continue running candidates, because I think eventually there will be breaking points. There has been before. I know Ted Brown mentioned Jesse Ventura and what happened with him, and obviously he was somebody who was somewhat famous already, but still he came from nowhere, was allowed in debates, people were impressed by what he said, and he won his election as Minnesota governor back in the '90s. So that kind of thing can happen outside of the so-called two-party system. So that's why we keep trying to do this, and why we don't give up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for running in 2022. You ran in 2024, but you were removed from the ballot, and then thank you again for running this year. And you're right. Even in a two-person race, if it's a Republican and just a Libertarian, nobody says somebody has to go out and vote down ballot for Democrats and then vote for the Libertarian because there's no Democrat on the ballot. They can just not vote. So that is people who consciously made a decision to vote Libertarian instead of just leaving a blank checkbox. And I think that's something that the Republican Party and the Democratic Party failed to mention, is that no party deserves your vote. No party is required to have your vote. It's either you vote for my guy or you vote for the enemy. No, there's a third option. Well, I guess there's two more options. One is, well, we're going to vote for this third guy, or I'm just not going to vote for anybody in that position. So there's been many races where I've said both these candidates suck and there's not a third option. I'm just going to leave that one blank. And they're going to see that they didn't get, neither one of them got my vote. So even, like I said, even in a two-person race, if it's a Libertarian and a Republican, Libertarian and a Democrat, when those Libertarians get, like you said, was it 36%?
32% in 2022.
32%.
But
That's,
one
again,
thing I did notice, because I had the fortunate, I was actually at the Brazos Center where they count the votes, where all the
mhm,
votes come into and so I was able to see the very last box that was brought in was from the MSC at Texas A&M. So I was able to see how that specific, the only voting place on the A&M
mhm,
campus actually voted, and in that box I got 38%. So there was a little
mhm,
bit of a, versus 32% district wide. So it gave me kind of a hope, for the younger people. There was a little bit more willingness even to vote Libertarian.
mhm. That's awesome.
But yeah, I think there's even a few states that have actually added none of the above or none of these candidates, something like that, on their ballots.
Mhm.
Uh, so yeah, so even if you don't have a third party to vote for, so in some cases you have something like that. But
And
I'm
I
all
think
for
in
it.
one of those states, none of the above actually won in one race.
Yeah, and to me, if that happens enough times, they'll start to get the message. Is kind of the idea. That's how change happens. And that's kind of going to be a recurring theme through this. No matter what questions I'm asked, is that the more I was thinking about this earlier, I was thinking another important message besides reminding people about trying to take us off the ballot and what they've done with the laws, is that nothing will change unless people are willing to engage and do something about it.
Mhm,
You have to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and not just complain about, well, things are bad now. If there's something you really want changed, you have to take action. And we're seeing it in some cases with some of the people that are acting against the flock cameras and some of those things, where you have people showing up to city council meetings, showing up to other things that they wouldn't normally have done in the past. We saw some of it with the COVID response. You had people that got fed up enough that they started to show up and make their voice heard. And elected officials will notice that.
mhm,
If you've been a county commissioner or a city council or whatever, and you're used to looking out and seeing an empty room every time you have a meeting, and then all of a sudden the room is full, you're going to look around and say, "Wait a minute, what's going on
What's
here?"
going on here?
Yeah.
Right.
Um, So if it doesn't take that many people to make that kind of impact, you just gotta, get organized at the time that you can make the most impact, and we really can do something. We don't have to just resign ourselves to the fact that, well, there's nothing we can do. This is the way it's always going to be. Because if you look back through history, that's not true. There have been times in the past where fundamental change occurred, and it was because people cared enough and took action enough to make a difference.
Mhm. All right. So you mentioned A&M, you mentioned flock cameras. What a coincidence. We have both of those on our list of questions for tonight. So let's start off with our A&M one here. I think it's the only one I have on here, actually. So House District 14 includes Texas A&M, for those who don't know. How would you protect free speech and academic freedom at public universities while limiting political micromanagement from Austin? I know we've seen some of this in the recent where Austin's come in and been like, you have to do this, you have to do that, or you can't say this, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's a great question, and some of that is real difficult to when you say, how would you protect it? Because we've had cases where, a professor at A&M, was supposedly pressured behind the scenes about what she was telling students that were, not sitting well with elected politicians. Um, and it's hard because some of that you just have to there's things in place to deal with corruption, and to me, that is corruption when you have somebody who is trying to use their power to silence people. Um, that's another one of those things that I was talking about where you just have to have people that take action and support it. Free speech is only defended if people are willing to stand up and defend it. What we've seen happen in Europe and the UK in recent years, where people just kind of, yeah, I guess that amount of censorship is okay. Well, then I guess a little bit more is okay, and then all of a sudden you're putting people in jail for a meme on the internet and things like that. We don't want that to happen in America, in Texas, and that's the kind of thing that can happen if people don't, again, stay vigilant and say, "We've gotta draw a line somewhere," and we're free speech is a something that all the people that we talk about that have died for our country and wars that have been fought and everything else, that's a big part of what they were fighting for, is us to be different, to hold to that principle of free speech regardless of what anybody else in the world is doing, and at universities, I mean, I can't think of a more important place because you've got people that's the beginning of their adult life. It's supposed to be a place where different viewpoints, different perspectives are all about it. It's all about learning what everybody else says and forming your views. And there's not a better or more important place to make sure that free speech is protected, and that includes students, teachers, faculty. I mean, whoever is there. So, as far as what I could do as a state rep, again, I'll probably sound like a broken record on some of this stuff, but ultimately it will be to oppose any kind of law that limits speech. And if there is any kind of action when it comes to committees or oversight or anything that deals with the universities, that those actions can be monitored and can be worked on, that would obviously be something that I would want to be a part of because it's hugely important to me. And I can't say exactly what I would be able to do. I'm big on not making promises that I can't keep, and I know that as one state legislator, especially if I was the only Libertarian Party one, or even
Mhm.
among one of three or four, if we had all the ones we have running elected, it would still be a small group. But I think we could make an impact. We could work with the Democrats and Republicans on some of those issues and make our voices heard. So it really
Mhm.
is going to be about incremental change and holding the line, and making sure that our message to people has to be stand up for free speech and freedom wherever you can, even if you don't like the speech, because if you go for censorship now, then when you do want that speech to be free and somebody else is telling you it shouldn't, then you can't say anything. I mean, you won't have that.
I don't know if I lost you or if that was me. Oh,
Did
there
an
you are.
essay protecting Howard Stern because he was under attack from the FCC for so-called obscenity on his radio show. And I didn't even like Howard Stern. It wasn't because I liked the guy and wanted to listen to his show. I didn't care about any of that. I believed in his right to free speech, and that if someone didn't want to listen to what he was doing on the radio, don't listen to his radio stations. It's simple as that. So to me, over and over again, that principle has put to the test for me, and that I've stood up for all kinds of people that I didn't have any interest in hearing what they had to say or thought their message was terrible. But the point is, they have a right to express it, and especially, again, like I said, at a university, that's the place among all places for people to be able to hash those things out and get those perspectives out in the open, and not have government trying to silence them like they would in some kind of communist country or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's very important when we talk about free speech, that a lot of people, especially the Republicans and Democrats, the parties themselves, um, don't kind of really put together is that the First Amendment, when we talk about free speech, prohibits the government from restricting speech.
Yes.
And we see a lot of people saying, oh, Facebook shouldn't censor you for this, or shouldn't censor this, or this private business is censoring people, and that's anti-free speech. Sure, it may be anti-free speech, but it's not violating any laws. It's when the government comes in. So when the state says you can't do this, or you can't say this, or if you post these memes of these politicians, we're going to come knock on your door. That's when we start having a problem. We start violating things, and I don't think a lot of people under really truly get where that differentiation is, and that can kind of get dangerous, not knowing where that line is.
Yeah, freedom of speech does not mean freedom from consequences
Right.
from your speech. But again, I think this is one of those things that, as libertarians, we're very consistent on when it comes to crimes that have victims. Most of us, me included, crimes that have victims, we want them to be punished, sometimes more
Mhm.
so than they are now.
Yep.
It's the victimless crimes that we want to be taken off the book, so we don't have the resources and the manpower wasted on people just buying products and services. And if you have somebody who decides they don't like what somebody says and they go assault them or kill them, that's already a crime.
Right.
So that crime absolutely should be prosecuted, but we don't say, well, because they said this controversial thing, well, we have to limit the speech by law because it led to this horrible thing that happened. That
Right.
person still had the free will to decide to go out and do that. And so we have to focus on what the actual crime is, and it's not in the speech, it's what somebody chose to do because of it.
Right. What's the old saying? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We've
Yeah,
come
and
a
I
long
know,
way from that.
right, yeah, and words, obviously, they do hurt, people's feelings, and sometimes deeply, but you still have to realize that no one person, like, I believe very much in individual liberty and the freedom of the individual, but no one person is the world doesn't revolve around you. You have to take that into
Hmm.
account, that not everybody is the same. Not everybody's going to be offended by the same things. Not everybody's going to support the same ideas or be nice and polite all the time. And you have to be able to deal with other people expressing things that you don't like, and being able to, if you live in society with everybody else, being able to adjust to that and still, live your life and live in peace with other people.
Right. All right. Let's see here. We are we're almost half an hour in, and we're on the first question.
I mean, you can just cut it down to three questions if you want to.
Well, let me go and pick and choose some of these.
Okay.
All right. Sure, we'll talk about this one next. All right. So, Brazos County property values continue to rise, much like everywhere else in the country and in the state. What state reforms would you support to provide lasting property tax relief without simply shifting the burden elsewhere?
Yeah, that's a great end of that question, because I mean, isn't that what they always do? The state government says, well, we don't set the tax rates, that's the county. But then the county is like, well, but the state has a budget that we have to fund with this. So they all kind of do the kick the can back and forth, like, well, it's not us, it's them.
Hmm.
And meanwhile, our everybody's costs continue to go up in the meantime. But I was thinking about this earlier, that the state government is able to give these exemptions, like homestead exemptions, for certain people. So that what does that tell you? Well, it says if they can give an exemption for some people, they could give an exemption to everybody if they really wanted to.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, if they did, you'd get pushback the other direction. The county say, well, if everybody's exempt, then we don't have the money for what we want to do, and we can't, raise the money for state budget and everything else. But ultimately, of course, what the truth that reveals is state budget's too big, and in many cases, the county budget's too big.
For sure.
So that's really the first thing, is that we have to look at what we actually should be spending money on, what the government actually has authority and responsibility to do in the state and even at the county level. And so that's a huge part, is the spending restraint, and beyond that, just the responsibility in general. Because people say, well, if you cut spending, then all these areas you don't have the money there. Well, you have to determine, well, should we have that in the first place? Is that something the government should be doing anything about? And
Hmm.
that's the kind of question that, like I was talking about earlier, people have just sort of let it happen for a long time, and just sort of, if something was taken over by government, then it just is for eternity. And you don't have that constant refreshing, or rejustification of why this is even something that government needs to be spending its money on, and why there should be laws about all of this. So obviously, ultimately, I think we should eliminate property taxes. But one state legislator can't come in there and snap his fingers and do that on day one. There's a lot that goes into that, but it starts with reducing, again, the overall government control and spending and responsibility, so that the people have their freedom back. And you don't have to say, well, we have to justify spending all this money. We have a rainy day fund, so to speak. The way I look at it, as one of my catchphrases, to say the entire state budget should be the rainy day fund, in my viewpoint. uh, it basically, it should exist in a situation where if there's emergency situations. um, Instead, of course, we had all of the state budget. And then on top of that, in 2020 and in the years right after that, we had a bunch of extra, oh, it's an emergency, it's a health crisis, so we got to justify a bunch of additional control and money and mandates and lockdowns and every other thing that our so-called small government conservatives in Texas just rolled over for. Um, so, yeah, you can tell I have a few strong feelings about some of those things. Um, but yeah, to get back to the question, it's so much of it is just a restructuring of the priorities of what is government actually responsible for, what should it be responsible for, and then once we've done that, what is the money that actually has to be raised, and once we've done that, it may be possible to eliminate property taxes. And people always they have a panic, because they're like, well, if we don't have property taxes, then an income tax is sure to happen. But the point is reducing spending and burden enough that that wouldn't also be necessary either. I don't think that's going to happen. It's one of those things that is kind of like, holding the dam.
Right.
Texas is proud of not having the state income tax. But a lot of people think, because of that, that the tax burden must be lower in Texas than a lot of other states because of it, but they don't realize how the property tax burden has grown so much. So that's a big part of it, is trying to eliminate that, and a lot of it is subsidies and other things that government does, where they play favorites in business, and all of that sort of thing. And there's a lot of, again, county and state back and forth, kind of scratching each other's back on those things too, in terms of, uh, well, we're going to pass, well, you've got to do this. Well, it used to be, you would say, well, the county people would stand up for themselves and say, well, it's an unfunded mandate, so you can't put this on us. But then they said, hey, but because we raised the property tax rates, we can just tell our people, well, we have to raise it because they put this on us. And then it becomes this thing where, again, they just go back and forth and blame the other one. And meanwhile, the average person gets screwed. So as a state legislator, I would have to just have that guiding principle of everything is maximize freedom, reduce government. How can we lessen the impact? How can we give people, like you say, lasting relief in a lot of areas, not just property taxes?
Right. And like you said, just because the government can take over something and run something doesn't necessarily mean that they should.
Yeah, and they don't like to let go. So that's the thing is
And once they
it
have it, they
becomes
don't want to get rid of it.
yeah, you when you were talking to Austin Kelly about the Texas agriculture being the ones over the school nutrition programs. I talked to somebody that was in my tennis league who works for that department, and she said that there's she almost never hears them talking about what's best for the kids as far as getting them the food they need. It's all about how do we get our biggest funding? How do we get more funding than we did the year before? That's
Yep.
what their goal is and what they're geared toward.
Yep.
And she was lamenting it. She's an older lady than me and was kind of like, I don't know how much longer I want to work for these. When I feel like I'm coming to an office where they're so detached from what the purpose of this is supposed to be. It's not about feeding kids and making sure they get proper nutrition. It's about how much money can we get in our department.
Hmm.
So that's just one example, and that's the kind of thing that I'm sure there's hundreds, if not thousands, of those type of stories in all departments in Texas.
Right. All right. It's almost like you can guess what the next question is because we just talked about subsidies. So if we move on to our next one here, with data center development reaching the Brazos Valley, should taxpayers subsidize these projects? And how should Texans ensure they pay their own grid, water, and infrastructure costs? Go.
Uh, yeah, well, I guess the answer to the first part of the question is no. No, taxpayers should not subsidize these projects. And interestingly enough, we've had some of this come up in the Brazos Valley area with we've had some private organizations that have formed, basically to kind of be sort of a neighborhood protection organization, you might say.
Hmm.
And there was one that formed basically around there was a plan to build a new highway that was going to be called the East Loop. And so the group formed and called themselves No East Loop. And then after they were successful at basically getting that at least temporarily off the table, then they sort of rebranded into a thing about roofs and ranches or something like that. But the basic idea is, again, protecting the rural
Hmm.
areas around Brazos County and the surrounding area. Uh, and I know that that's one of the things when it comes to the data center development, all the stuff is something that they're covering. So this is yet another example libertarians point to of where things can be accomplished by private organizations taking action and paying attention and doing and not
Hmm.
just saying, oh, we have to tell the government they need to do this about it and they need to do that about it. Now you need to be vigilant about what the government is doing, but this is again, this goes all the way from local all the way to federal, where we have too much of the time. You have one party that's like, well, we need business freedom, and then the other party says, well, we need to tax the rich because the corporate. And then meanwhile, as we know, the big campaign donors to both parties are the ones that make sure the legislation is written to benefit them the most, so that
Yep.
it doesn't matter which party is in majority, they're going to get what they want out of it. And this is just another example because you have one group of people, whatever you want to call them, that's sort of demonizing the idea of data centers as being this evil thing that's going to come and take over your neighborhood. So they want to say, well, the government needs to ban this. And then you have the other side saying, well, actually running commercials on TV, but here's all the great things in your life that data centers bring you. So you should support them. And again, they make it into this black and white thing. Are you pro data center or are you anti? Instead of actually talking about these issues about like where does the money come from, how does it affect people, how do people decide who's got the right to build where, and what those are the things that are harder to deal with, which is why people talk about them less in those soundbite type things, because if they can rile people up just in a pro or con that benefits particular people, that's another question, is when you see things like that, who's funding that, what
Hmm.
is their agenda, what are they trying to do, and then that includes both sides of it. Are there people that are anti data center development because it's taken money away from them, the thing that they're profiting off of is hurt, so all of that is a factor. And so that's why I said the easy answer is to no, taxpayers shouldn't be subsidizing. The second part is a lot more difficult because you've got so many layers of government involved in that. Even
Hmm.
even when we had, the 2021 winter storm, where everybody was like, "Oh, Texas all this happened to Texas because they had their own power grid instead of being on this national thing. They should have done that." And they made it seem as if Texas had, we were this outlaw group that was running our own power, and that it wasn't still a huge bureaucracy that was government controlled and regulated like everything else. I mean, it still was, it still is. So that's not what the issue was. And I don't know. There's just so many layers to that, that it's again one of those things you feel like, I want to strip it down, and what are the basics of, what is government responsible for? And if I'm in that position as a state legislator, it's kind of going to be like the old Tom and Jerry cartoons, where Tom is trying to catch all the pots and pans that Jerry's knocking off of the shelves, because I know that it'll feel like that in terms of, well, I'm trying to fix this over here, but then this is falling over here, and this, and everybody all is concerned with their lane. This is
Right.
what benefits me, or this is what hurts me. So I'm worried about this. Well, we can push off whatever onto this other thing. And so everything is just a matter of transferring blame and responsibility. But that's what happens when you get government involved in so many things, is that every decision affects so many people. And so that's going to be the toughest thing if I'm in that position, or anybody that actually wants to change things, because you can't just tell people what they want to hear. You have to be able to say, we got some compromise here, we've got some incremental change we can make, and we just have to try to do what's best for everybody, that it will impact people negatively the least, and try to maximize freedom for everybody. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to reduce costs and everything, because sometimes the nature of a free market raises costs anyway. But overall, I think there's a lot of things where reducing government control and regulation and increasing competition will reduce costs. Again, if people stay vigilant about it, if they just sort of accept, well, it's going to be more, like I've heard a lot of people do recently, that just so many
Hmm.
things, people just sort of, the attitude is, oh, well, prices are just going up. It used to be politicians made a big deal about fighting inflation. Now they just sort of talk about it like, well, it's just there. If we have all this wonderful stuff we have, the government does, we just have to have that,
Right.
just deal with it. So it's going to be up to people to care enough about it to fight it. And that's just true of so many of these things.
All right. All right. If you are in the chat, I see we've got a couple questions and comments have popped up in
Oh,
here.
great.
I've got two more questions lined up here, but let's go ahead and bring up a few that were asked. Talking about none of the above earlier on, Connor asks, what are your thoughts on adding none of the above to all general election ballots, especially in races without libertarian candidates? It is generally seen as more official than undervoting.
Yeah, I'm all for it. And unfortunately, in recent years, we went the other direction, where we used to have unopposed candidates on the ballot. And now they actually changed the ballot to where the unopposed candidates are in a separate section that just says these people are elected. And I
Hmm.
don't like that, because it doesn't tell you how many people actually wanted to vote for those people. If you have an unopposed candidate, and you look at, maybe one election they got 10,000 votes, and then in the next one they only got 8,000, then that's a thing that tells you something, to say, hey, maybe there were enough people that were like, I'm not going to vote for this person that isn't opposed. Maybe there's something different I want. I'm not happy with this. And when you just have the unopposed candidates off to the side in a separate section, it doesn't surprise me that it happened, because probably some of those unopposed candidates were the ones that got that done. They
Would
didn't
not
want
be
to be embarrassed.
surprised.
Yeah, they didn't want to show how few votes they got. They wanted to just say, "Well, I'm the only ballot, so I'm elected. No, don't worry about how many people would have voted for me."
I won the
So yeah,
primary, therefore I'm elected automatically.
yeah. So well, and of course, back in 2022, when I ran that state rep race, so like I said, I ended up getting 32% of the vote on the night of the Republican primary. John Rainey was opposed in that Republican primary, and he won. And there was no Democrat in the race. And the media person did not mention the Libertarian candidate, didn't mention me, of course, but he said, "What are your plans for the general election?" And John Rainey's response was, "Well, I'm done, because there's not a Democrat in the race." So he basically just,
He didn't even know you were running.
yeah. And if you look at the uh, campaign expenditures, this is where that whole thing about kicking us off the ballot becomes almost comical, because before they passed the law that said the Secretary of State could remove us, they actually sued our
Yep.
candidates who didn't pay the filing fee to remove us from the ballot. And the judges said no. But in order to file that suit, they had to say that they were harmed by us being on the ballot. So in my race, where officially, because it had to be by the individual candidate, John Rainey sued me that I was doing harm to him by not paying the $750. At the time he did that, I had $100 in the bank in my campaign account. He had $193,000, and all of the spending he did in that campaign was in that primary race. Once he had won in the primary race, the only spending he did in the general election was donating to other Republican candidates in other races that were actually competitive. So he didn't even spend any money on the general
Yep.
election race. Yet I harmed him by not paying $750 to the state fund that he would never see anyway.
Right.
He was at a horrible disadvantage against me, Nathan. You have to understand, because I didn't pay that fee.
Well, how
I mean,
dare
it's
you
just
not pay?
yeah, it's just ridiculous that they would somehow think that that makes any kind of sense. And the courts agreed that it didn't make sense. So then they had to put it in statute and just say, well, we'll just have the Secretary of State just go ahead and remove them. It's actually kind of funny again that it took them like 5 or 6 years for that to even occur
Yeah.
to them. Like they didn't bother to do that for a while because I thought, oh, surely these Republican judges we've appointed or elected, they'll side with us. So there's no, and then they didn't. 2 cycles in a row, they didn't do that. And they finally were like, well, I guess we just got to put in the law.
Yep.
I'm really kind of a little surprised they didn't just put it in the law where it says, nah, no libertarian candidates can run. That's just in the law now. You just can't do that.
It's
I mean, it
almost
seems
like
like
that.
that's the next step.
Yeah. All right. One more question from the chat. Let's see if we can get some quick responses on or quick answers on this one. Susan Barney asks, if elected, what are 1 or 2 top ways you would improve government transparency in Brazos County?
Excellent question. And I believe when Clyde was on, he talked about the fact that he's tried to get a meeting with our local congressman for several years, and multiple congressmen, because they changed the redistricted in our
Sure.
previous one and the one now. Nobody would even just have a meeting with him. So there's a good way right there. If somebody wants to meet with
Open
me,
meetings.
try to make it happen. Actually talk to and respond to the constituents that I have. That would be, and in fairness to the previous incumbent, John Rainey, I believe that, I met him before, and I think he was the kind of guy that he was fairly accessible. Uh, I don't know as much about his replacement, Paul Dyson, he's only been there one term.
Mhm.
I met him briefly also at a Habitat for Humanity event, but in general, that my number one thing is, if I'm elected to represent you, then my biggest responsibility is to talk to you, to the constituents of the
Sure.
district, and find out what it is that you want, you need, what it is that you're being kept from doing from government restrictions and laws and things. How can I maximize your freedom and reduce your burden and make your life easier? How are your rights being violated, and how can I stop that from happening? Things like that would be my constant duty in that position. Uh, I would be more, I think, it takes a while. There's a lot of, slow dragging people's feet into the, technology of the new century and all that. So I don't think our previous representatives have been very active on social media and things like that. They haven't been, super responsive in that area. So that would be an area where I would try to open up all of those avenues to
Mhm.
contact me and have dialogue with me as much as possible. Some people might even get sick of me, as hard as that is to believe, with the way I would put myself out there, because I would take the job seriously that way, and that if that's the position I'm putting on myself, I take that seriously. I want to hear from everybody, even if you are the complete opposite of a libertarian and you think I'm just the stupidest, weirdest person ever, and you hate all my ideas. And I still want to talk to you, and we'll find out what it is that you want me to do, what you would do better. I want to know what's bothering you, and maybe we can even find some common ground. Maybe I'm not really as bad as you think I
Mhm.
am. That I always extend that invitation to everybody, regardless of whether they're in my area or not. I'm somebody who likes getting to know people, and especially if they disagree with me, because I want to know, where do they get those ideas, where they come
Sure.
from, and can, as long as we're not just sitting there yelling at each other, if we can have a conversation, we might find a lot more shared in common than you might think. So, yeah, that would always be the number one thing for me. It would not be hiding in an office somewhere. and I would be trying to have staff or other people that did as much of those type of things as possible, where I could be with the people as much as I can be, because that's something I enjoy anyway. And if it's my actual elected job, then I'm absolutely going to take that 100% seriously and try to do that. And maybe, if I'm elected, that by the squeak short margin in 2026, that I would be connect with enough people that by the time that the next election came around, I'd win re-election in a landslide, because then by then
Right.
I'm just so super popular that everybody knows, hey, it's not some stuffy politician, it's Jeff. So
I don't know how you're not more popular than you already are.
yeah, I mean, obviously too much laziness on my part, but I'm working on that. I'm always
uh,
trying to find ways to fight my body's falling apart and getting more decrepit, but I'm trying to like maximize my what I do have left, to try to get out there as much as I can. So
all right. All right. We've got, I'm cutting a few questions out here on the interest of time. So we've got
yeah,
two
you're
more
gonna ask
left.
me what my favorite Star Wars movie is now, right?
No, no, we're going to go to one of
Yeah.
the questions that is near and dear to my heart that I have spent so many hours and money
Oh,
on.
okay.
Um, what limits should Texas place on license plate readers, facial recognition, and government data sharing to protect people who are not suspected of a crime?
Yeah. Well, the last time I started with the first part and said the short answer. This time with the second part of that, I feel like is the important part that I kind of alluded to earlier. Is like, even if people are suspected of a crime, we got a lot too many crimes on the books, and
Hmm.
so that's one of the number one things, is trying to make sure that only crimes that actually have a victim are the ones that we're pursuing. And
Hmm.
yes, I do include some things that people might not say there's a direct victim of, such as driving while drunk and things like that, because in that situation, you kind of have the society as a victim, if you want to call it that, and it's a little different than just consuming, intoxicants in your house, but not going out and turning yourself into an active weapon. So that I have a little bit different view than maybe some more extreme libertarians do.
Hmm.
Um, we've seen yeah, the civil asset forfeiture and the eminent domain and stuff, where basically, again, it's like government is coming in saying, well, we can make a claim to what you have, to your property and everything else. And it's easy for me to say abolish these things. I do believe in that. Again, it's something where one state legislator can't just instantly do that. But it's tough, because I think technology, you're not going to be able to like stop technology. And it's a good thing overall, because a lot of technology ends up helping, improving our lives. But one of the main things, of course, is the Fourth Amendment is basic in that, oh, you have to get a warrant. It can't just be well, and we think this might be a problem, so we're just going to put this in place and then justify it later. Um, it needs to go through due process, and that we went through that with some of the stuff about people's cell phone data, because when cell phones started to become so ubiquitous, and the smartphones and everything, that started to install this stuff to try to say, well, if we put it in everybody's phones, then it's not something where we're targeting people, and then all of a sudden later we've got a bunch of data we can use and things like that. And obviously it's the same with the license plate readers. um, they don't just target people that are suspected. We've got other states have put it like as far as, in fact, there's even a federal bill that had something about facial readers to even start a car and things like that.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's something where we've got to stay vigilant as citizens. Say we're not going to accept that. We don't believe that, as much as we might want to track down people that are actually guilty of you know significant crimes, assault and human trafficking and murder and things like that, we want to find those people. But is that desire to find those criminals uh, more important? Are we going to just cede our rights that far and say we're going to have uh, things put in every car where you can't start your car unless you have this device, and you pass whatever
Hmm.
control. There's sci-fi movies made about this stuff, and a lot of it is starting to happen for real. And all that's always been the case, is that there's always been um, things that were way off when it came to those predictions, and things that were pretty darn close. And we've got some things, all the way up to the federal government. You have these things being snuck into bills because, again, if we just accept these huge omnibus bills that get passed, you can put thousands of things in there that nobody's going to read.
Yep.
Somebody doesn't go in there and tell them about it. And I know Thomas Massey tried to stop one of those when it came to a device in the car that was originally in a transportation bill. So every once in a while you'll have one legislator that is willing to stand up for that, but people, if they don't say to state people that this is not going to fly, that you can't set this up to seize people, to use it as a way to either gain revenue or to close cases that have nothing to do with why you were seeking this in the first place. Um, we're not going to stand for that. And I think as a state legislator, as a state representative, again, my job will be to look at everything that passes through there to say, does this pass the test of what's constitutional? Are people's rights being violated more by the government than they are by perpetrators of crimes? Because the justification, of course, is that you're protecting people of being victims. But if you take people's rights in order to do it, then you're victimizing those people instead. And it's the old thing Spike Cohen does about, like, if somebody puts a gun to your head and asks for your money, everybody agrees that that's a crime. But if you wear a suit and get behind a podium and say, well, we're going to take your money now, then people go, well, he's an authority figure. So, okay, I guess he's justified.
Hmm.
And that's not the exact words, but it's basically the concept that you have a lot of these things, and you justify it because you can get older people that live, in neighborhoods where they say, well, I want my neighborhood to be safe. I don't, and they say, well, if we have this camera, we have this license plate reader, we'll protect you better. And they kind of just go along with that because it's presented as a safety measure. But there's as we know, all sorts of things presented in the name of safety that don't make anything safer. And here in Brazos Valley and Bryan College Station, we've had medians on roads portrayed as, oh, this is going to increase safety. And we have documented proof that it does exactly the opposite, because we've had emergency vehicles or fire trucks that have not been able to get where they need to get fast enough because of the medians. And we've got an active, again, private organization trying to stop that, trying to remove those medians to take back some of that power. And again, it's another thing where local government blamed state government and said, well, it was a Texas Department of Transportation thing that we just agreed to, and now we have this contract, and now we can't do anything about it. So, going back to that theme of those parts of government that if they can push off responsibility on someone else, they're going to do it. And
Yep.
so yeah, it all factors into that same stuff. And I'm sorry I don't have a better answer to that in terms of some kind of magic potion that's going to fix it. But I know that it's very complicated and there's a lot of stuff. And I guess the best answer that I can really say is that I would remain vigilant. I'm never going to sell out your rights because somebody says something will make something safer or more secure. I'm not going to just talk in slogans about, well, support law enforcement. I'm not one of those people who encourages people to hate police or have this antagonizing viewpoint of people that way. But I'm also not going to say that anything law enforcement wants is justified because they want it. That's not true
Hmm.
either. So you have to weigh those things at all times and, again, maximize freedom and protect everybody's rights, not just a few people.
Yeah, and I've heard from many people who defend facial recognition, data sharing, license plate, all that stuff as well. Your cell phone tracks you more than these cameras do, and my response always to them is, I can leave my cell phone at home, and I can go to the grocery store, or I can go to the gun range, or I can go to the bank, or I can go to church, or wherever, and not be tracked by it. But if there's cameras that I cannot avoid, and they don't need a warrant to actually search them, whereas if you want to search to see where my phone's been, you got to get a warrant. Supreme Court has said so.
Yep.
don't need that for cameras or for this software. So um, where's that line of, oh, if you've done nothing wrong, your phone is tracking you more? Well, where's that line of just put a camera in everybody's house? I've read 1984.
Yeah.
I know exactly where that goes. And if you're not willing to put a camera or a listening device in your house, in your residence, so that the government can listen and watch whenever they want, if you're suspected of something, then you should not be in favor of any of these other tracking measures that require no warrant.
Yeah, I remember us making fun of places like Australia where during the virus panic time, people were walking out of their house on their porch, and immediately law enforcement were like at the edge of their porch asking them where they're going, or they had an
Mm-hmm.
app on their phone that they had to check in with, periodically to tell them where they were, so they weren't violating curfews or
Right?
lockdowns or whatever it was. And we as Americans said, "Well, at least we're not like that." But
Here
we
we
have
are.
this habit of we have this habit of letting those things happen a little bit at a time and going, well, a little bit of that's okay. And then all of a sudden we're we have less freedom than we used to have, and we're not any
Yep.
safer.
All right. We are getting close to the hour here. Let's do one last question and then we'll wrap it up. If you are now tuning in, we are getting towards the end of this. Jeff's been a great candidate here.
Hey, thanks.
Um, if you do have any questions, again, feel free to toss them into the chat. If we don't get to them on the stream, I can always send them to Jeff and he can post them or he can talk about them later. Here we go. Last question before we wrap things up here. All right. How should Texas address growing water and electric demand while protecting existing residents, respecting private property, and making large users bear their own costs?
Man, I was hoping you were going to end with an easy one. I had to give me something hard again.
No softballs here.
Yeah, these are some tough things. I want to spin this to talk about my favorite movies or something. Yeah, I mean, again, the answer more than anything is uh, it's going to be about weighing those things that are, what rights are existing, what's being violated, who has the right to what, and are we having the government decide those things, or having private people decide those things? And I
Mhm,
think, again, when it comes to, if somebody has private property that they purchase legally in all factions, and they happen to have more water on their property, and they want to sell it to somebody else, then to me, they've got the right to do that. And I know there's a lot of people who want government to come in and try to equalize things or make, level
mhm,
playing fields. And that's when we start to have problems, is when you start having government playing favorites. And they've been doing it in so many areas. And when you talk about, and again, it's one of those things, you have people that do oh, well, this is a natural resource, therefore people have a right to it, therefore it shouldn't be a commodity and all this. But, you can say that, but somebody still has to pay for things. Somebody still has to be the provider. You can't force anyone to do that by statute.
mhm,
When you do those things, all you're doing is trying to make yourself feel better, is to feel like you've done something. So you have to, again, increasing competition is a big part of it, and not we've ceded too many of these things to government control, and already said things like, accepting monopolies in certain situations, where the government just, it's like our stuff is just done by the city. Well, it's the city government, so well, they've got the electricity, they've got the water, they've got the sanitation, everything just goes through city
mhm,
government. And people accepted that because they said, well, this is a way to do it, because it was pitched as, well, this is the people of the city working together to do this thing. And then those same people, a few years down the road are like, why my prices keep going up? Why is this keep
right.
and why they won't pick up my garbage can because it's like 2 inches the wrong direction on the street, and all of those things that people said they wanted, and then they turn around and have a problem with it. So again, you have consequences for those actions. And I think, just like with everything else, I don't think I actually used the term sunset earlier, but that's kind of what I'm looking at when it comes to when you analyze those things from a state government level. You can't go in and tell the local city, well, you can't, you have to change this entire system.
Hmm.
But whatever I could do uh, at the state level to open up the market and allow for competition to exist, that would be what I would be trying to do. So whatever, when you have those things where all of a sudden you start seeing those ads from, you know, people that are trying to say, well, the people are trying to take away your power. Usually, again, it's the people trying to maintain a monopoly,
Yep.
rather than look out for the interests of the actual citizens. So I would be clearly on the other side of that, no matter what people were coming in my office and saying. If anyone who's telling me this has to stay this way, if I look at it as this is a barricade to competition and free market, then I'm going to oppose whatever that is, regardless of who is telling me
Hmm.
that. So that again will be my guiding principle when it comes to respecting private property and covering those costs, because it's going to be about, again, it's not a guarantee that prices are going to stay at any level, because the whole point is price controls is bad. That's the government,
Yep.
again, playing favorites. But the idea is if you open up competition in as many areas as possible, you will have prices go down, because you won't be able to have people just say, well, this is just what it costs. You just have to accept it because we're the only game in town.
Yeah. Price controls work when you don't allow competition because it prevents prices from ballooning out of control. But when you do have competition, you don't need price controls because the competition is the price control. And
Yeah.
if everyone's always looking to undercut your opponents because they want more people to buy their products, so yes, competition is going to continue to drive
Yeah.
costs down.
I won't go into a long thing about it. I'll just say a recommended book that I have for anybody, and it's a children's book. So regardless of what your reading level is, I think you can handle it. There's even an audiobook version.
Ooh, perfect
It
for
was
me.
by Julie Borowski. It was called "No One Can Make a Pizza." Anyway, it's a good book, kind of on a similar subject about just
Mhm.
how many people and how much different things goes into any one thing like that. And it's basically a pro free market book for kids. But anyway, it's a
It's similar along to like iPencil.
maybe. I haven't actually read that one, so
Yeah, iPencil. I forget who is it. Freeman? Is
yeah.
it Freeman?
Somebody told me about it. I've never actually
Yeah.
read it. I've got
Uh,
a backlog of audiobooks that I to listen to myself. That maybe I'll get to that eventually.
all right. All right. So that's going to wrap it up for all of our questions. We did cut those short. Very in depth conversation here. Before we get going, though, any shout outs? How do people get a hold of you? Do you have a website? I know you do.
Yes,
What kind of do you need any support? What can people do to help with your
always.
campaign?
Yes. My website is vote-miller.org, or vote-miller, however you want to call that little thingy in between. But if you just type Vote Miller without that thing, it'll go to something else. So make sure it's vote-miller.org. And that will have a link to all my social media stuff as well. But it's at Real Jeffster on the Twitter X, the Twix, as I like to call it.
Twix.
Uh, and Facebook's a little harder because I have too common a name, but it's linked on my website, so you can just go through there for my separate campaign page on Facebook. I'm also on Discord, and really, my email is jeff@vote-miller.org. You can email me. I'm very responsive to all those things. I think Nathan can tell you it usually doesn't take that long for me to respond unless I'm
Mhm.
really, really on vacation. But um, anyway, as far as support, yeah, I think I wore my Brazos County shirt that's got also the local website, brazoslp.org, where we have our other candidates, or will soon have all the candidates up on there as well. And like I said, if people decide something is important, it's going to be up to them. So if they want to make a monetary donation at my website, of course, I'll accept that. Uh, but honestly, what really reaches people is people, reaching out, making phone calls, making texts, going to people's houses, all those kind of things that are more like sort of really touching the people when it comes to
Hmm.
getting close to election time. So I don't expect some millionaire to suddenly decide for me to be his project. So the truth is I'm not going to have enough money to run a bunch of TV ads and get a hold of people that way. You know, I can use social media in ways that are free. I intend to start making some more videos and things like that. And that'd be great. But if you want to help, that's you want to reach out to me and you want to offer something specific, especially if it's a free service. You're not just saying, "Hey, pay me all this money to be your campaign guy." I mean, if you're doing that, then you better have some real track record you can point me to and an actual strategy
Hmm.
and all that. If you don't just tell me you've helped candidates in Iowa, 30 years ago or something. But what I expect is most people are not going to be able to do that part of it. But if they say, "Oh, I make flyers or I do this other thing," they have some sort of talent, then by all means, let me know what it is because that's the kind of thing as a grassroots campaign. We can use that sort of thing, and any impact we can make in this race is going to be beneficial. The most important thing is really getting the message out there that we're here, that people have a choice. If we come out of the election with more people knowing we exist, that's a gain. That's a positive. So that's what we're trying to do more than anything. And if we can get people to be interested in being a part of something else that isn't just what we've been doing for decades the same way, that's what we're trying to do. So by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me if you've got ideas of things that you want to help with. We can come up with something. And a certain campaign support director actually talked to me once about trying to find me a campaign manager. So, if you want to be that person, then by all means contact me or Nathan to make that
Hmm.
happen. So, yeah,
He's talking about me. So, all right. Well, thank you again, Jeff. Like I said, it's been a blast. Stick around after this. For everybody who's just now tuning in, just catching the last bit, you can go back and watch this on YouTube. You can watch it on X. You can watch it on Facebook. Leave comments there. Share it on all the different social media platforms. Go out to Jeff's website again. It's vote-miller.org. Send him some money, help him volunteer, make him some graphics. That way he doesn't have to do it and I don't have to do it. Um,
even if you just want to tell me how stupid my answers will, I'll take that too. I like feedback. So if you want to tell
there we
me
go.
about all the things I should have said and instead of what I did, then by all means tell me that also. I'll take it.
There we go. All right. Well, Jeff, you have a good night. Everybody who's watching and just joined in and has been here for the long haul, y'all have a great one. Stay tuned for more candidates coming up later.
Thanks a lot.